The sun had just started to dip beneath the horizon over the endless stretch of Highway 365 in Arkansas, casting a golden sheen across the dusty asphalt and the lone garage standing sentinel beside it. I wiped the sweat from my brow and looked out over the road, the steady hum of engines and the metallic clatter of tools forming the familiar soundtrack of my days. This was my world, my job, my life, and in many ways, my second home. My name's Jake. I've been a mechanic at Joe's Garage for going on 5 years now. It's a small-time setup, just Joe and me, working on everything from beat-up sedans to 18-wheelers, and every now and then, the occasional motorcycle cruising in off the highway. We've dealt with it all, rust buckets, fancy imports, and everything in between. But even though the work's mostly routine, there's something about this garage that doesn't sit quite right. First off, Joe himself is a peculiar guy. He's tall and wiry, with a scraggly beard and a habit of wearing the same pair of overalls every day, the name Joe stitched in cursive on the chest. Don't get me wrong, he knows his way around an engine, but he's got his oddities. Chief among them, that damn clock on the wall. Just a basic wall clock, nothing fancy, but Joe insists on winding it by hand each and every morning. And heaven help you if it's even a minute off. He'll throw a fit like you've insulted his mama. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are rules around here, rules that don't make a whole lot of sense to me. Take the one about not working on cars after dark. I know what you're thinking. What's the big deal about doing repairs at night? But believe me, it's a strict, no-nonsense rule here. Joe is adamant that we shut down the moment the sun dips below the horizon. And I mean exactly the moment. If I'm elbow deep in a repair, I have to stop, clean up, and lock up. No exceptions. Then there's the rule about the tools. We've got this old battered set Joe keeps separate from everything else, locked away in a box in the back room. He's the only one with the key. I've asked him about them, but he always gives me the same answer, just shakes his head and says they're special. Special tools for special jobs, maybe? But the strangest rule by far is the one about the cars themselves. We get a certain kind of customer now and then, folks who roll in off the highway with vehicles that are off. The paint never looks quite right, the engines run way too smooth, and the tires wear in places that don't make sense. Joe always tells me to be nice to these cars, treat them gently, make sure every detail is perfect. And when they leave, he makes a point of patting the hood and murmuring something under his breath. It's all a bit strange if you ask me. But hey, it's a job, and it pays the bills. I've gotten used to the quirks and the rules. Still, sometimes late at night, after the garage is closed and I'm driving home through the dark, I'll catch something out of the corner of my eye. A car, maybe, or just a shadow, and I start to wonder if there's more to this garage than meets the eye. As the sun sank lower, stretching long shadows across the garage floor, Joe stepped out from the back room. His overalls were smeared with grease, and there was a glint in his eye, like he knew something I didn't. "Time to close up shop, Jake," he said in that low, gravelly voice of his. "Sun's almost down." I gave a nod, wiping my hands on a rag as I powered down the tools and started locking up. Just another day, another dollar, another strange evening at Joe's Garage on Highway 365. But as I locked the main door and followed Joe into the dimming light, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was watching us from the darkness, waiting for its moment to glide in off the highway and into our little garage. The night air was crisp and cool as I drove home from the garage, stars scattered across the sky like tiny diamonds. I was lost in thought, replaying the day's events in my mind, when my phone rang, sharp and insistent. I glanced at the screen and my heart sank. It was Joe's Garage. "Hey, Jake, it's Joe," came his voice on the other end, urgent and tense. "I need you to come back to the garage. We've got a car coming in." I glanced at the time on my dashboard, 12:47 a.m. "Joe, it's almost 1 in the morning. Can it wait until daylight?" "No, Jake, this one's special. The owner's going to be here any minute, and I need your help. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one." I sighed and rubbed my eyes. "All right, fine. I'll be there in 20. As I turned the car around and headed back down the dark road to the garage, I couldn't stop wondering what kind of car could possibly justify a call like that. Was it one of those cars? The ones Joe always treated like royalty, the ones that needed special handling and the tools he kept locked away. When I arrived, Joe was already out front waiting. There was a gleam in his eye I'd never seen before, intense, almost feverish. "Good, you're here?" he said as I stepped out of the car. "The owner's running a little behind, but she'll be here soon." "She?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. Joe nodded. "Yeah, it's a woman. Drives a unique car. You'll see what I mean when she gets here." We stood there in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the distant hum of crickets and the occasional car passing by on the highway. Then, without warning, Joe's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto something in the distance. "She's here," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. I followed his gaze, and my eyes widened as a car approached, its headlights casting an eerie, almost otherworldly glow across the dark asphalt. The car itself was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Sleek and silver, it had curves that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. And the sound, God, the sound. It wasn't an engine growl or a mechanical hum. It was a low, smooth purr that seemed to hum through the air itself, vibrating in my bones. As the car rolled into the garage, Joe stepped forward with a smile. "Welcome, ma'am," he said, his voice heavy with respect. "We'll take good care of your car. Jake here will help me get her running smooth." The woman stepped out, and I took an unconscious step back. She was stunning, but not in any normal way. There was something off about her beauty, almost inhuman. Her eyes locked onto mine, sharp and probing, as though they were searching for something deep inside me. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jake," she said, her voice low and confident. "I'm sure Joe's told you all about me." I shook my head, feeling a bit dazed. "No, ma'am, I don't think so." She smiled, a small, mysterious smile. "No, I suppose not. Well, I'm sure you'll learn all about me soon enough." As Joe started working on the car, I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease creeping through me. There was something about this woman, something about this car, that felt deeply wrong. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was in way over my head. As Joe worked on the car, I couldn't shake the creeping sense of unease. The woman stood beside him, watching with an intensity that made me feel like I didn't belong. I tried to concentrate on the task at hand, but my thoughts kept drifting to the strange rules, the peculiar cars, and this eerie midnight visit. The engine was unlike anything I'd ever laid eyes on. It gave off a steady hum that felt alive, mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. Joe moved with a precision I'd never seen before, his hands steady and sure, as if he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. As the hours dragged on, the woman's presence became increasingly unnerving. She didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, staring at Joe as he worked. I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't understand, one I hadn't agreed to play. At last, after what felt like an eternity, Joe stepped back from the car. The repair was complete. The woman gave a slow nod, her eyes gleaming with what looked like satisfaction. "Thank you, Joe," she said, her voice husky and confident. "You've done an excellent job, as always." Joe smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "It's our pleasure, ma'am," he replied. "We'll make sure she's running smoothly for you." The woman nodded, then turned her attention to me. "And you, Jake," she said, her gaze piercing into mine. "You're new around here, aren't you?" I nodded, a twinge of unease tightening in my chest. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I've been working here for a few years now." She smiled, small, enigmatic. "I see," she said. "Well, I'm sure you'll learn to adapt to our little garage." As she turned to leave, a wave of relief started to wash over me. But then she stopped and glanced back, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Oh, Jake," she said, her voice still low and confident. "One more thing. Joe here will tell you all about the rules. But remember, the most important rule is never to ask questions. Just do your job and don't ask why." With that, she walked out of the garage, leaving me more unsettled than I'd ever felt. Joe watched her go, a look of admiration lingering on his face. "She's a special one, Jake," he said, his voice rough and quiet. "You'll learn to appreciate her uniqueness." I nodded, a knot of unease tightening in my gut. What had I gotten myself into? And what exactly was going on in this garage? As the woman's car disappeared into the night, I turned to Joe. "What's going on, Joe?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's so special about this garage?" Joe's expression grew serious. He glanced around the garage as if making sure no one else was listening. "Jake, I'll tell you this," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "This garage is different. We've got clients who come in here who aren't like other people. They're otherworldly in a way, and we've got to treat their cars with care." A chill crawled down my spine. "Otherworldly?" I echoed, barely able to form the word. Joe nodded. "Yeah, Jake, you'll learn to handle it. Just remember, the rules exist for a reason. Don't ask questions. Just do your job." I nodded again, unease wrapping around me like a cold fog. What had I signed up for? And what else was hidden behind the garage's strange facade? As I mulled over these thoughts, a strange sound echoed from the back of the garage. It was faint, like whispering. I turned to Joe, eyebrows raised. He just shook his head. "Don't worry about it, Jake," he said. "It's just the garage settling. Let's get back to work." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets this garage still held. As the days went by, I found myself gradually adjusting to the strange rules and the peculiar cars that rolled into the garage. But even as I settled into the rhythm, a nagging sense of unease clung to me. The whispering noise I'd heard in the back room still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't stop wondering what secrets Joe might be keeping. One night, as I was locking up, curiosity got the better of me. I slipped quietly into the back room, determined to uncover whatever it was that had been bothering me. The space was dimly lit, shadows stretching across dusty shelves that creaked under the weight of old boxes. My heart pounded as I sifted through files and clutter, hoping to find some clue. After a few minutes of searching, I came across a folder labeled Classified. Intrigued, I opened it and flipped through the contents. The documents inside were vague but unsettling. Phrases like experiments and subjects leapt out at me, hinting at something far more sinister than your average car repair. A sudden sound behind me made me freeze. I turned, and there was Joe, standing in the doorway, his eyes narrowed and unreadable. "What are you doing, Jake?" he asked, his voice low and edged with warning. I tried to stay calm, even though I knew I'd been caught. "Just looking for some paperwork, Joe," I said, casually trying to slide the folder back. Joe's expression didn't waver. "You shouldn't be in here, Jake," he said firmly. "This area is off limits." A ripple of fear ran through me. What was Joe hiding? What would he do if I kept pushing? "Sorry, Joe," I said, doing my best to sound sincere. "I didn't mean to snoop." Joe's expression softened slightly. "Just be careful, Jake," he said. "There are things going on in this garage that you don't understand, things that could get you hurt." I nodded, the knot in my stomach tightening. What exactly was happening here? And what kind of danger was I stepping into? As I left the back room, a heavy feeling settled over me, like I was entangled in a web of secrets and lies. One way or another, I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost me. The next day, a car pulled into the garage that made my blood run cold. Sleek and black with dark tinted windows, it seemed to radiate menace. Joe stepped forward to greet the driver, a tall, intimidating figure with a respectful nod. "Who is that?" I asked Joe, trying to sound casual, though my voice was tight. Joe shot me a serious look. "That's one of our special clients," he said. "You don't want to cross him, Jake. Trust me." I nodded, unease settling over me like a storm cloud. What kind of client could make Joe sound that wary? The driver exited the car and began speaking to Joe in hushed tones. I couldn't make out the words, but the energy between them was tense. The man gestured sharply, his eyes flashing with anger. Then, without warning, he turned toward me, his gaze locked onto mine, sharp and cold. "You're the new mechanic," he said, his voice like ice. "I've heard a lot about you." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "That's right," I said. "I'm Jake." The driver smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "Well, Jake," he said, "I'm afraid you're going to have to learn to work on cars that are a little different from what you're used to." A chill ran down my spine. What did he mean? And what kind of cars was I really working on? As the driver got back into his car and pulled away, I turned to Joe. "What's going on, Joe?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What kind of garage is this?" Joe's expression was grim. "You'll find out soon enough, Jake," he said. "Just be careful, okay?" I nodded, a heavy sense of foreboding settling over me. I knew I was in over my head, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get out. As the days passed, I found myself becoming more and more entrenched in the mysterious world of Joe's garage. The cars that came in were indeed different, and I began to realize they weren't just ordinary vehicles. They seemed to be imbued with a life of their own, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were more than just machines. One night, as I was working late, I saw Joe and the driver from the black car huddled in the back room. They were speaking in hushed tones, and I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. But as I watched, I saw them glance at me, and a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the driver stood up and approached me. "Jake, we've been watching you," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "We think you're ready to know the truth about this garage." I felt a surge of trepidation, but curiosity got the better of me. I nodded. "The cars that come in here are not just any cars," the driver continued. "They're vessels, for lack of a better term. Vessels for entities from other dimensions, other worlds." I felt my mind reeling. "Entities," I repeated, trying to process what I was being told. The driver nodded. "Yes, entities, beings from other realms who need a physical presence in our world, and we provide that presence in the form of these cars." A sense of horror crept over me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We modify the cars to accommodate these entities," Joe said, his voice matter of fact. "We create a shell of sorts that allows them to inhabit the vehicle and interact with our world." My stomach turned. "And what happens to the drivers?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The driver smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "The drivers are sacrificed, shall we say. Their bodies are used to house the entities, and they become vessels in the truest sense of the word." A wave of revulsion washed over me, and I knew I had to get out of there as fast as I could. But as I turned to leave, I saw that the door was blocked by several large, imposing men. "I'm afraid you're not going anywhere, Jake," the driver said, his voice cold and menacing. "You're going to be part of our little operation, whether you like it or not." I knew then that I was trapped and that my fate was sealed. The garage was a front for something sinister, something that involved supernatural entities and human sacrifices, and I was caught in the middle of it all. As the men closed in on me, I knew that I had to think fast if I wanted to survive. But it was too late. The last thing I saw was Joe's face, his eyes cold and unfeeling, before everything went black. When I came to, I was in a car, driving down the highway. I had no memory of how I got there or where I was going. But as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My eyes were black as coal, and my skin was deathly pale. And as I looked closer, I saw that I was no longer alone in the car. There was something else with me, something that was driving. And I knew then that I was no longer myself. I was a vessel, a shell, a host for something sinister and otherworldly. The garage had done its work, and I was now a part of its dark and twisted world, and I knew that I would never be the same again.